Hello, and welcome to another episode of Let's Argue About Plants, the podcast for people who love plants.
But not always the same ones. I'm Carol Collins. I'm the associate editor at Fine Gardening Magazine.
And I'm Danielle Sherry. I'm the executive editor. I feel like one of these times, Carol, we should just see if anybody's paying attention and not skipping forward and, make up our pen names. I'd be like Candy Joseph Drive or something like that. That's like, aren't you supposed to do the street you grew up on and, your favorite candy name or something like that? I don't know.
Oh my gosh, don't do the street you grew up on. That's like a security question.
It's none of my security questions. So for any of you Russian hackers out there, you won't get anywhere with that. Now, my mom's middle name. No, I'm just kidding. So today, Carol, what's our topic?
We are going to talk about drought-tolerant trees and shrubs. So I know this one's going to be in your wheelhouse.
It really is. It really is. Well, you know what? Here's what happened to me is that I went out there and I was like, oh my God, I've talked about so many of these plants already. So in some cases, I went with, a genus that I know is a top performer, but maybe I threw in a species that I don't grow or a cultivar that I'm not growing yet, but want to grow. Cause God, I just felt like I was hitting repeat on the button for a lot of these.
You have done an awful lot of episodes of this podcast, and at some point you're going to run out of plants that it's going to happen.
I'm running out of plants. I am running out of plants. And I really, after having done the spring mulching, I really don't want to create any more gardens. My back can't handle it anymore. It really can't. Well, so was this a difficult one for you, Carol? Because you don't have a ton of woody plants, right?
I do. I mean, I have some, and I was able, and they all have to be drought tolerant because of my sandy soil and my lack of watering, my lack of willingness to water. So yeah, I've got some, and I think all of the ones on my list are ones that I actually grow. So
that's awesome. Well, hit me with your first one.
Okay, so I've got blue star juniper. And that's a dwarf cultivar of the, it's got a couple common names. The one I hear most often is single seed juniper, which is based on the little cone, which looks like a berry. It has one seed in each one.
I've never heard that before. That's so cool.
I've never seen a cone or berry on my plant. So I don't know. Maybe they get them when they're older. I'm not sure, but I don't know if I've seen them on other people's blue star junipers. This is one you see a lot, right? I mean, this is just a standby. It is so easy to use in the garden because it stays really small. It gets like 1 to 3 feet tall and 2 to 4 feet wide, and it takes a really long time to hit that top size. And people will plant them on sort of 2 or 3 foot centers, and they grow together so that you can use it as a ground cover. A little accent. It's got beautiful color, like a soft blue. And the newest growth is the brightest. And that's the blue star name. If you look at the ends of the growing tips, it really does look like a little blue star.
Nice.
Yeah, really cute. It's super drought tolerant. I've never given it any extra love. It does not, however, like hot and humid climates. And so this is hardy from zones 4 to 8, very cold hardy, but not super happy in the very humid parts of the Southeast, for example. And that may be because of its native range. It comes from the Himalayas, northeastern Afghanistan, and southwestern China. So like hot, dry places. Very well drained soil, right?
That rocky, caliche looking, crazy gravelly soil. Yeah, that's what I can envision.
Yeah, this one you don't need to maintain it or do anything really. A little bit of it might brown out near the ground where the water's splashing up, and you just like pull that out, but no pruning really is necessary. Very deer resistant. The deer totally leave it alone. And I maybe expected, maybe some of you grow it, but I felt like this is one I need to mention. It's a super cool plant.
Yeah, I feel like junipers don't get the respect they deserve. I really don't. I've probably said that before on this podcast, but junipers are bomb-proof plants. They generally are, except for, their aversion to humidity. If you wanted, there is a reason that they plant junipers in the parking lots of grocery stores. Like, they are tough. They get run over. They get salt spray. They get the worst of the worst of the worst soil. They get full sun, radiant heat. And junipers do awesome. And I don't think I have a blue star juniper in my garden, but I do have Dobbs frosted, which is another larger type of juniper that I adore. And it's so tough. I feel like every year I pitch in our editorial meetings that we need to do a junipers article where we, kind of call out some of the unsung heroes and some of the really interesting varieties, because that blue of that blue star, it's gorgeous. I mean, that's the most glaucous blue plant that you can think of. Now, do I want to see a bank of 50 of them at a Stop and Shop? No, but 3 or 4 or 5 in my garden would look really cool, I think. So yeah. All right, that's my pitch on junipers. Start planting junipers, people. Stop discriminating against junipers. They're awesome. Listen to Carol crying out loud. My next, my first shrub is a shrub that a while back we did an episode, which was live from Broken Arrow Nursery, which is in Hamden, Connecticut. And one of the plants that I purchased during that episode was sea buckthorn. And it was a plant that I specifically purchased for my hospital hill, which is bright sun, horribly lean, well-draining soil. The hose doesn't reach it, so I never go up there with the water. So I was trying this sea buckthorn up there. Now, I bought a male and a female, and I got to be honest, it's a gangly looking shrub. It's still hanging on up there on Hospital Hill. It's not the best looking shrub in the world, but hey, it's doing something. But recently, I was back at Broken Arrow Nursery, and they had a variety, a cultivar named Sprite. So this is Sprite sea buckthorn, and it's Hippophae raminoides Sprite. This is zones 3 to 7. And you're like, all right, enough. Tell me what this thing looks like. It looks like a tiny, rounded silver willow shrub. It is the most silvery gray, green foliage, very, very soft, fluffy kind of texture to it. And then the underside is almost a stark white. So it's absolutely beautiful. If you think about, the breeze blowing through it, it really gives you that ethereal, beautiful look to it. And the things that I didn't like about my straight species that I had purchased, which is kind of a gangly growth habit and not very full, this Sprite cultivar, it kind of eliminates that problem because it's just neat and compact and just gorgeous. Now, this is a male, so this isn't going to get the orange berries that a female of the straight species is going to give you, but that's okay with me, because really for me, it's about the foliage. It's about that beautiful, beautiful foliage. Other things that are cool about it is that the way that it grows, if you can envision a willow, it's a very dense, almost thicket of branching structures. So it's great habitat for local birds. They really dig that because it's quite a protection area for them. I had to take a picture of the Broken Arrow sign. So here's Sprite sea buckthorn I come across. And this is what the sign said: an excellent shrub in challenging sites where low fertility, check, drought, check, and extremes in temperature limit the plant palette. Check, check, check. Hospital Hill. So I did not purchase it that day. I put myself on restriction, but I will be going back and grabbing a few of these and throwing them up in my low fertility, droughty, extreme temperature hill in the back of my house. It's very cool.
Does the straight species have the silvery leaves, or is that something special about this cultivar?
Yeah, no, the straight species does have the silvery leaves, but it's just that gangly habit that I think probably is why they developed this Sprite. And the silvery leaves are what attracted me to buy it in the first place. And darn it, I should have held off and waited for the Sprite. All right. So, Carol, I was very excited about your first choice. Now, what's your second choice coming up here?
My second one is New Jersey tea. That
Oh,
is, yeah, Ceanothus americanus, zones 4 to 8. And this one was in an article called Native Perennials to Start from Seed. And it almost got cut from the article because Steve said, but wait, this one is a shrub. And I said, but it's a shrub that acts like a perennial. So it
mm,
got in, and you can grow it from seed. And I will get to that in a little bit. But this is a native. It's native to Eastern and Central North America. And people say that it was used as a tea substitute during the Revolutionary War. It
oh.
doesn't have caffeine or anything, but I guess you can dry and brew the leaves like tea.
We
Um,
are not advocating that. We are not advocating that. If you grow a third eyeball in the middle of your forehead, it is not on us.
no,
Legal disclosures.
no, we don't
Okay.
know. We don't know how those revolutionary people, like, if this was good for them or not. But,
Right, exactly.
legend
Exactly.
has it that they were
Legend.
desperate for tea and they
I like
used
that.
it.
Legend has it. Legal disclosure. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So it gets it stays pretty small. It gets 3 to 4 feet tall and maybe 3 to 5 feet wide. And it grows very easily in average to dry, very well drained soil, likes the well drained soil, and especially like sandy loam or rocky soil, just fine.
Perfect.
And what makes it so drought tolerant is it has these long, deep, woody roots that are almost like tree roots. I think they're red, and
Oh, cool.
which is kind of just cool, but they delve deep into the soil. And so that's what gets this plant through drought. But it
Mm.
also makes it very difficult to transplant. Does not love to be transplanted. So if you had this plant and you want to move it somewhere else, what I would suggest, either propagate it from softwood cuttings or you can grow it from seed.
Mm.
The seeds it does germinate pretty well, but you should pre-treat it in one of two ways. You can pour boiling water over it and let it set 24 hours. That's if you're sowing the seed in spring.
Wow.
Um, you can also do that pre-treatment if you're doing it in the fall, but it's not quite as necessary because the freeze thaw cycle will also kind of work to soften up that thick seed coat. Um,
Okay.
yeah, but so our author for that article, Perennials from Seed, was Bill Carter from Prairie Moon Nursery. And
Mhm.
so he provided these tips and he said, don't worry, it will not cook the seed. So if you're pouring boiling water on that, go ahead.
All
It works
right.
just fine. Will not kill the seed. Um, Glossy green foliage, just sort of like a medium green, oval leaves with little teeth around the edges. And it blooms in late spring to early summer, around now, early June to mid-June. And it has sort of foamy white little flower clusters that are maybe 1 or 2 inches. And they are just covered with the tiny pollinators. It's like
Mm.
swarms of them around this plant. And what's cool about that, and this is another thing that Bill clued us in on, is that hummingbirds hang out around this plant, not so much for the nectar, but to hunt those tiny bugs, especially when they are feeding their young. They
Oh,
get
no
quite
way.
carnivorous and they will catch tiny little insects, including those pollinators. And, I'm sorry, little pollinators, but baby hummingbirds have to eat too. So
Right?
this is a good plant for hummingbirds, but not for the reasons people usually plant hummingbird plants, like nectar plants. This is
Yeah,
another
yeah.
reason. Yeah. So it's a pretty
We
cool plant.
we forget that, hummingbirds are, they're I guess that would be considered omnivores because they do. They eat little tiny insects and their nectar as well. Wow, that's so cool. That is like everything about that plant is cool.
Yeah.
And admittedly, I can't remember that article that saved my life. So I'm going to have to go on to findgardening.com and look that up. And it was who from Prairie Nursery?
The author's name is Bill Carter, and that's
Bill
a good
Carter.
way. If you're on findgardening.com, you can just look it up by his last name, and you'll get this and a regional page that he wrote for us. And it was in issue 168, so there's a reason you're not remembering. It's been some time since this ran.
Wow, that's awesome.
But a fun article also for folks that are interested in trying growing plants from seed. Like there are quite a few native plants, North American native plants that you can grow from seed.
That's so cool. I'm definitely 168. Okay, findgardening.com. That's amazing. Well, and I think the other cool thing is that, right off the bat, you said ceanothus, and I immediately think West Coast. Like that is a West Coast plant. That's one of those plants like Hebes that we always go out to visit the West Coast and go, oh, darn it, zone 8, zone 9. Like we can't grow that, but that there is a species of ceanothus that does really well, for the colder folks, basically. That's awesome. All right, looking it up, making a note. That's a good one. You might win this round, Carol. You might win this round.
Is it a competition, though?
It totally is. No, I'm just kidding. Well, so I'm gonna kind of pick up where you left off with the junipers and talk about a shrub that I don't think gets enough respect, and that's Deutzia. Now, I feel like Deutzia gets lumped in with, say, beauty bush, Colquitzia. It's one of those old-fashioned, our grandmothers had them in their gardens type of plants that, does do this beautiful spring display of blossoms. And then everybody pretty much forgets about it after that. And it's, I hate to say it's a throwaway shrub, but a lot of people do. They think it's a throwaway shrub, along with, maybe mock orange, Philadelphia. It's those three that never get the respect I think they deserve. But in particular, Deutzia is extremely drought tolerant. It's a plant that I've grown several different species and cultivars over the years, various different gardens, and it never bats an eyelash at a droughty, full sun situation, and lean soil too, so low fertility. And a variety or a cultivar, that I think is truly beautiful and also will give you some foliage that can carry you through the rest of the season after it blooms is Magician. And I'm just going to warn you that Magician is actually spelled the French way. So it's Magicien. So when you're looking it up, chances are Google's going to say, did you mean? And you go, no, that's the wrong spelling. But no, it's actually spelled that way. And so it's Deutzia hybrida Magician. And this is zones 5 to 8. This guy is going to get 6 to 8 feet tall and wide. So it's a bigger selection of Deutzia. And Deutzia hybrida, it's X hybrida, applies to a lot of different species of Deutzia. And I learned from the research for this episode that these are all hybrids that are a cross between Deutzia longifolia and Deutzia discolor. So, they kind of took the best attributes of both of those Deutzias and put them together. In this case, for Magician, it ended up in this densely round shrub that is deciduous. It's got these broad arching stems that the foliage kind of comes out in a yellowy chartreuse color, and in full sun it will hold that color year round. So that's kind of cool. It kind of gives you that a little shock of chartreuse that makes it a focal point. But I gotta say, the clusters of long pink bell-shaped flowers that just cover the shrub in late spring, are its real claim to fame. It's just absolutely stunningly beautiful. And speaking of hummingbirds, hummingbirds go a little bit bananas over it because, of course, you're getting that, little bell-shaped flower that's a little elongated, so it's almost tubular. The other thing about magician is, which I believe I'm gonna make an assumption why they call it magician, is that it turns a brilliant burgundy in fall. So you've got that bright yellow, new growth, and then it kind of fades to a greeny chartreuse, and then it turns burgundy. So like a magician, you're getting all these different colors. And I loved. I think I was touring around with Paul Capiello at Udell Botanic Gardens down in Kentucky years ago, and he referred to deutzias as bomb-proof shrubs. So I thought that was a pretty good way to describe deutzia and magician deutzia as a bomb-proof shrub. Just a tough shrub. And if you've got the space for a 6 to 8 foot shrub, I would say that's a good one. All right, Carol. So off mic for a second, we just mentioned that. I forgot to mention the size of Sprite, my first shrub, which is 4x4, and you forgot to mention the botanical name of juniper. Do you want to give it a whirl?
So blue star juniper is a Juniperus squamata. And
squamata. All right. And Sprite sea buckthorn is 4x4. But you know what, guys? Save yourself the time and just go to the show notes on finegardening.com, because then you actually get to see pictures of these plants too, and everything's right there for you to be able to write down easily. Don't take it from us when we're trying to record these things and we get everything wrong. No. So Carol, third drought tolerant, just bomb-proof shrub.
So what I'm going to give you one that it's kind of a shrub to small or even large tree, depending on if you're cutting it back or what its growing conditions are, and that is sassafras. Sassafras albitum. And that is hardy from zones 4 to 9 and native to the eastern and central United States. And this is one that we saw on a recent fine gardening botanical tour with Ed Gregan. And I was like excited to be the one that he's like, does anyone know what this is? And it was flowering. And so I was like, I knew.
Full disclosure, no one else on staff got it, and Carol did. Yes, she got the gold star.
But it's, speaking of gold, these flowers are totally cool and unique. And that was what, because mine was flowering at home. It flowers in sort of early-ish spring or, mid-spring. Around here, that's like late April, early May, and it flowers on bare branches. So the first things that come out are these golden flowers that kind of look like a 1960s light fixture, like kind of like with the sprays.
Description.
Yeah, they're really cool. And again, insects like early pollinators just love them because there's not a lot else going on. But this plant can get quite big, and the older it gets, it can get 30 to 60 feet tall, and it can have a spread of 25 to 30 feet. So, you've kind of got to be careful about where you plant it. And also the other reason you have to be careful where you plant it is that it has a big root zone and its roots are allelopathic, which means that if they put out multiple compounds to dissuade competition in their root zone. Yes. And so, don't put your preciouses under the sassafras because it's gonna want to terminate them. It likes full sun to partial shade. It's very adaptable to many soils, especially appreciates the sandy, well-drained soil. So it's, hence the drought tolerance, has a deep taproot. And to ID it, it's really quite distinctive. Its foliage comes after those flowers, and it has the 3 different foliage shapes. So it has unlobed, it has leaves that are 2-lobed that some people call the mitten, or I don't know, is it fork?
The mitten.
The mitten. And then it can have 3-lobed, which people will call the fork, or yeah. But when you see that mix of foliage, it's really one thing it could be, and that's sassafras. And it has wonderful fall foliage color, and I've got a picture of that in the show notes. It's sort of a golden color flushed with red, and you'll notice in that photo that there are plenty of holes in the leaves. This is a plant that lots of insects, particularly caterpillars, love to eat. And so do not freak out if there are holes in your leaves, because it is like a very functional part of the ecosystem. And some of the insects that use it are like spice bush swallowtail, tiger swallowtails, many moths, and again, the birds are eating those caterpillars, feeding their babies with those caterpillars, and the ones that make it are, wonderful butterflies and moths. So,
yeah, circle of life, you gotta have food for the birds, gotta have food for the caterpillars. So yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, very cool plant. I will say, everybody equates, if you don't live in New England, you equate the most brilliant fall color with our sugar maples, with our acers. But to my mind, I think actually the sassafras puts on a better fall color show, because it looks like somebody lit the tree on fire. I mean, it's pretty intense.
I have heard that female plants, and this is a dioecious species, and so there are male plants and there are female plants, and I've heard the female plants put on extra color when they are fruiting, and that kind of calls in the birds. So I don't know if that's true, but I have heard this about.
I mean, we're going to say it's true. It's our podcast. We're allowed to make as many bold statements as we want to, and it's fact on the podcast. That's so cool. My one added bonus is that if you crush the leaves, it smells like Fruity Pebbles cereal. I mean, it does. It's got this very fruity, almost unreal fragrance to the foliage, which I just love. And it's really cool when you're walking around with, little kids, and you go, hey, crush this up. And they go, oh, Fruit Loops or Fruity Pebbles, whichever they have at their house, if they do. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. So that's an interesting one, because it's part tree, part shrub. And I think that's really neat. I'm going to hop onto that bandwagon and do a part tree, part shrub too. And the one that I came up with is a plant that I have tapped for a replacement. So we know that, you look at your gardens over the years, you identify a problem plant or a plant that's struggling. I'm not going to name names of what plant that is in my garden, but there's one that's getting taken out this fall, and my replacement that I've identified is a winter hazel. I really want a winter hazel. I've been looking at, various different species and cultivars in the magazine for years and years. And the one that I've got on tap is Golden Spring Winter Hazel. And that is Coreopsis spicata Golden Spring. It's zone 6 to 9, 5B to 9, in that range. So I think I'm still in the game. Full sun to part shade, which is exactly where I need to put it. Well drained, low fertility, low water needs, which check, brings in that drought tolerance quite nicely. 4 to 8 feet tall and 6 to 12 feet wide. So if you can kind of estimate like a low spreading vase is kind of what the overall appearance of the shrub looks like. And so winter hazel, picture a potato chip type leaf to it, which is very similar to witch hazel. So hence, the common names winter and witch hazel. This one blooms a little bit earlier than witch hazels do, especially for us here in the East. You can usually count on it to start putting on a show towards the end of January. And what that show is that on the bare branches that are kind of twisted twisted and gnarly looking, you get these almost chains of pearls that are these little itty bitty yellowy creamy flowers that are all attached like somebody just, kind of hung grandma's pearl necklace all over the shrub. It's also it's slightly fragrant. People say it's fragrant, but I don't know. I've stuck my nose in a bunch of them, and it's never really struck me as the most fragrant plant, but maybe it's just my nose. So a little bit of fragrance to them. I do want to point out that, there's a lot of different species of Coreopsis, of winter hazel, and not all of them are drought tolerant, allegedly. Only the spicatas are known for their definite drought tolerance. And I think that's because they have a really deep seeking root system in comparison to other winter hazels, which are more shallow rooted. So of course that would not make them good candidates. So after this one blooms in January and February, the new spring foliage emerges, those potato chip like leaves, and golden spring emerges a bright gold color, and then eventually fades to more of like a mellow yellow. I'll also say that the stems and the calyxes from the flowers obviously persist after the flowers go by, and they're pink. So that's kind of interesting that you've got this pink and yellow thing going on, which really kind of, just ups the ante on this tree-like shrub. So again, that's golden spring winter hazel. In whoever's, book, it might be considered a tree, it might be considered a shrub, kind of like sassafras, but it is on tap to come into my garden in late 2022. All right, Carol, we're coming into the home stretch, and what have you got for the home stretch shrub?
I think this might be the most old-fashioned one in the whole bunch.
What? More old-fashioned than Deutzia? All right, bring it.
Peegee hydrangea.
Oh, yeah.
And, I feel like I was a little nervous to put this on my list because I might seem unsophisticated or something.
Ooh.
But, this is a classic for a reason. This is a hydrangea paniculata. I'm not sure.
Potato.
Right? Grandiflora is the actual cultivar name, but pretty much everyone calls this one Peegee. And it is super cold hardy, zones 3 to 8. So, this is one of those bomb-proof plants in my garden. I inherited this one. It is probably, I'm guessing, at least 50 years old. So it has become more like a tree. And I think it has reached its sort of maximum size of 10 to 15 feet tall and wide. This can also, when they're younger, they look and act like shrubs. Mine was trained into a single stem by somebody long ago. And so it's got this canopy of, beautiful foliage. And then in midsummer, it starts with the flowers, those white classic panicle flowers that can get up to 12 to 15 inches long. The gorgeous shape, and they're, just covers it. And then those will turn pink as the season progresses into fall. And a lot of people say that the fall foliage is not, is unremarkable is the word I saw most often. But it turns a kind of nice shade of yellow, at least in my garden. And that, complements those rosy flowers that are then they age to sort of an amber or, like tan color. But I think that looks pretty cool in that week or two when you have both the fall foliage and those flowers on the plant. I think it looks really cool. And it's right out by the road. It has never gotten any kind of extra water. And we have definitely had very significant droughts in the 10 years or it's more than 10, 12 years that we've lived here. It comes right through. Now, a younger plant, you may need to give it a little bit of water to get it through those driest parts of its first few summers. But I really think that once it's established, it is quite low maintenance, quite carefree. And, this particular plant that I have has a little bit of a story. In October of 2011, we got this freak October snowstorm, and it ripped out the back part of its root system, came out of the ground, and it laid down on the ground because it still had its foliage, it still had its flowers. Those got covered with snow, and then the weight of it just tipped the plant over. I pruned the top of it back hard. With the help of my husband, we stood it up again and we staked it for a season, and it's fine. It's thriving. It came through. My
11 years later too. It's not just like it came back for a couple of years and then gave it up. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, my husband works at Fine Home Building, and he was blogging about a construction project at the time, and he blogged about this plant, which I think is the only time he has written with such love about any plant. But he was so sad when it tipped over, and he very willingly, he thought, oh, that's it, I can get the chainsaw. But when I came to get him to stand it up, he was like, okay, we can do this.
He got to use some equipment. That's why he was into the rescue mission, because he got to use some kind of equipment. I'm envisioning him out there with like a block and tackle or something like that, propping it up. That's incredible. So cool. Well, that speaks to its resilience.
Yeah, it's super resilient. I got a good look at the roots. They're sort of fleshy roots, and it had a good root system, which I think helps it get through the droughts and stuff. Yeah. Cool plant and a survivor.
Yeah, for sure. And I will say, that is known as, and when I worked at a nursery, we'd have people come in and go, I want that church tree. The tree that you always see at churches, the one with the pink flowers that looks, like panicles, and they called it the church tree. So many people would come in and saying that. And that's because here in New England, that is very common to see an old, congregational church that's been here since the early 1800s. You will see a Peegee hydrangea tree, much like yours, trained to a single stem. And it's usually right up front and center. That's pretty common to see around these parts.
Yeah, this cultivar has been in the United States. It was introduced from Japan in the 1860s, and so There you go. That is an old cultivar.
That is. We might have to start claiming that as native status pretty soon. I don't know. Is it like an antique? You hit 100 years and you're considered an antique?
Definitely an antique species. Right?
Yes, I like it. All right, so I can't do a drought tolerant podcast on shrubs and not mention Caryopteris. We all know I've never met a Caryopteris I haven't loved. But y'all are sick of me talking about the 4 or 5 different varieties that I have in my garden. So I picked a new one. And this is Caryopteris clanadensis. White Surprise. And this was a fairly new one to me within the last year or two. It's zones 5 to 9, so it's a little bit hardier than a lot of Caryopteris, which kind of tap out at zone 6 as far as what they'll take for cold hardiness. But this is bluebeard, blue mist shrub. It goes by a lot of different common names, but 4 foot tall and wide. And White Surprise is a variegated version. So the foliage is going to be a gray-green, small leaf that's serrated on the ends, and all around the serration, the serrated edge is bright white. And for me, it reminded me of Caryopteris diverticata, which is one of those weird, is it a perennial? Is it a shrub? It is a Caryopteris that dies completely to the ground, and everybody pretty much knows snow fairy as the common cultivar, which is a bright white and green variegated Caryopteris with blue flowers in fall. But this White Surprise, similar, but it's not, it won't die completely to the ground. It's going to have that woody structure year round. And I mentioned it in passing, but the blue flowers that emerge in mid to late fall, when there is literally nothing else blooming in the garden for us here on the East Coast and in the Midwest. I've seen this happen. All of a sudden, this Caryopteris puts on a show of these blue, spidery flowers that literally look like a blue mist. It just looks like this beautiful blue mist in the garden. I have, grown a lot of Caryopteris in a lot of different situations, but primarily my property is full sun, lean soil, well drained because it's very hilly, and basically awful conditions. And Caryopteris I can count on to always pull through no matter what. And I have been really, really terrible to my Caryopteris. A lot of times I'll start them on my hospital hill and I'll layer them. It's a shrub that layers very easily, which means that I take, one of the stems and I pile some soil up on top of it. And eventually the part of the stem that's kind of the tip and is touching the soil roots itself. And I go in there and I hack off a chunk of it with a spade. And I will transplant these Caryopteris into slightly better conditions, which is still very droughty, lean soil. And they do excellent. So, this is a plant I can't recommend highly enough. This whole genus does really, really well in drought conditions. But White Surprise is one that I have not grown yet, but is definitely going to make its way into my garden because I feel like, having that variegation is key for all of those months that it's not blooming. And then in fall, it puts on that blue mist shrub excellence. And you just go, yes, that's why I got this plant. And now, because everything sounds better with a British accent, here's Peter to talk about the importance of water.
Greetings from retirement land, dear listeners. I'm happy to report that I'm back from my initial celebratory travels and have decided to stay home for the summer. I'm quite looking forward to sitting in my back patio in July and August, simply sipping iced tea and taking in the view. To all of my English friends and relatives rolling their eyes at the thoughts of drinking iced tea, I say, don't knock it till you've tried it. Mind you, I draw the line at iced coffee. In anticipation of a summer spent in our backyard, my wife and I have been gardening and sprucing up the landscape these past few weekends, with mixed results. You see, we've had some oppressively hot weather here in the northeast, and having spent the better part of the last 5 decades in an air-conditioned office for 8 hours a day, I've forgotten the importance of hydration whilst labouring outside. Things would start out grand as we began digging in the early morning hours, but by noon, I'd already changed my sweaty shirt twice, and the margins of my vision were blurring slightly. I drank water, I swear I did, but apparently not enough. And well, let's just say for a split second, I longed for my cool, temperature-controlled office. I quickly came to my senses, though. My brush with gardening-induced heat exhaustion taught me a few valuable lessons. 1, I should listen to my wife when she scolds me about refilling my water bottle more frequently. 2, I need to be better about watering my plants. If I experience those symptoms after only a few hours in the sun without proper water, imagine what my plants, especially the newly planted ones, experience. And 3, of course, I should listen to my wife about everything. With summers getting increasingly hotter across the globe, I also think it's a good idea for me to start buying plants that don't need regular irrigation to survive the Sahara Desert. I mean my backyard. Okay, well, I'm off to grab the hose and refill my iced tea glass, but perhaps not in that order.
So Carol, I'm happy to hear that Peter is getting more into gardening in his retirement, but man, he needs to understand the importance of hydration when it's 90 degrees outside.
We all do. We all forget.
This is true, especially gardeners until you're passing out. Well, let's make sure that our expert is in good hydration status and see what she has to talk about for plants that are drought tolerant.
This is Amy Galloway. I am a horticulturist at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center in Austin, Texas. Living in Central Texas gives me the opportunity to test out the drought tolerance of a lot of different plants. And so I've come up with some favorites over the years. The first one that comes to mind is flame acanthus, which is Acanthus quadriphytus variety rhytii. It's a beautiful shrub that blooms from summer to fall, even in the heat the height of the heat in central Texas. It has bright cherry red tubular flowers that are hummingbird magnets. It's extremely easy to grow, and Flammacanthus does well in pots as well. So you can plant it in a pot in your patio and watch the hummingbirds out of your window. It blooms best in full sun, but it can handle light shade. Another one of my drought-tolerant favorites is Evergreen sumac. The scientific name is Rhus virens, although it's not technically a true evergreen because it loses its leaves just to replace them within a week with a new crop. It, for all intents and purposes, is a true evergreen shrub. It makes a really nice hedge for screening, but it also can be grown more like a small tree habit. Additionally, a fun benefit is if you plant a female shrub, you'll have the fuzzy red fruits that mature in about September that birds love. But not only birds love the berries, it is also edible to humans, and it tastes like raspberry lemonade. You can soak the berries in water and make a tart tea-like drink that is very high in vitamin C. Another drought-tolerant woody that I really love is Eisenhardia texensis, kidneywood. Kidneywood brings a really nice, unique texture to your garden. It has both finely divided small leaves and a really open, wispy structure to the shrub. It has spikes of white flowers that bloom intermittently through the warm months, and these flowers draw in bees in droves. The bees are swarming it when it's blooming. These blooms also gift humans that walk by with a wonderful honey-like smell, and it is just a really easy plant that is extremely drought tolerant to add to your garden. One of the most outstanding drought-tolerant plants that I can think of is Viguaria steniloba, the skeleton leaf goldeneye, also called resin bush often as well. This is like a really nice rounded shrub with really, really interesting leaves, hence the name skeleton leaf goldeneye. And when it's blooming, it is absolutely covered in yellow daisy-like blooms. And these attract many pollinators, butterflies, moths, bees, as well as other insects for its nectar. And after those blooms are spent and they become seeds, the granivorous birds really enjoy these seeds. So you're bringing in both your pollinators and your birds. Skeleton leaf goldeneye can be in sun or part shade, and so it can be adaptable to different areas in your garden as well.
Well, I am now happy to add a few more drought-tolerant woodies to my list of maybe being able to grow or at least being able to recommend to people, because it's a tough situation to garden in.
It is, and very common, right? There's a lot of us that deal with it, even in our relatively rainy region.
This is true. I mean, now I know what the Southwest feels like.